Hello, welcome to my IB research presentation on the theatre tradition at Kathakali. Now today I'm going to be delving into the history of the theatre tradition and also the depth of research that I've done into the convention of Mudras. I've also frequently seen that the tradition has been described as the place in which the gods and demons come to play, which I found actually really nicely after doing my extensive research encapsulated what this theatre tradition is about. So why I chose Kathakali? For me, Kathakali was interesting because it not only incorporates various different elements for an entertaining piece of theatre, but it actually is rooted in history and culture. So it combines elements such as dance, intricate hand movements, detailed makeup, facial expressions, all together to form a piece of theatre, but it's actually also conveying a history-filled story of the religious movements in India, specifically Kerala at the time. And it actually originated and developed in the 17th century and is still ongoing today. And for someone who's very interested in literature, it was almost a challenge for me to pick a theatre tradition that actually didn't use speech and used mudras, hand movements, as the main form of communication. But actually I'm also very interested and have always been intrigued by sign language and the way in which people can convey emotions and how they feel through this different medium. And actually I was very thrilled to realise that even though there isn't literature involved in the actual plays of Kathakali, it's rooted and based on literature and on religion and religious pieces of literature. So I've chosen to focus on mudras, and mudras are there to convey anything from a word to a phrase or to an entire meaning. So an introduction into mudras. So there are 24 basic hand gestures which are almost similar to what we in the English language call an alphabet. So if you wanted to become a fully trained Kathakali actor, you would have to learn the 24 basic hand gestures because all of the other mudras are based off of those 24. And when these are combined with the facial expressions, which are called rasas, meaning emotions, and the body movements in some form of dance, you can convey the intended meaning or the intended phrase that is needed for that point in the play. And I actually found this quote from the book Kathakali by Philip B. Zerilli, and it says, "The aim of Kathakali is to transcend the mundane and enter the worlds of gods, heroes and demons." And I was really interested by this word transcend, and that idea of transcending from the first time I watched Kathakali to even now when I watch it after lots of research, I definitely feel like I almost enter this different fantasy world. And I think that anybody who watches it will definitely get those similar feelings. So on the next slide, I'm just going to show you a brief video of a Kathakali actor who isn't fully costumed, believe it or not, and isn't doing the facial expressions. It's just very simplistically the 24 basic hand gestures, and I think it's just a good basis and introduction into the convention. So I think that gives you a really good insight just into the intricacy that's involved in the mudras, which I'll later explain. So some background information to Kathakali as a tradition. It hails from the South Indian state of Kerala and is said to have originated and developed in the 17th century. And actually, if you were to directly translate the word Kathakali, it means story play, which I thought really well explained Kathakali to someone who perhaps had never come across it, because it's actually based upon and is used to describe and explain the stories from the Ramayana, which is one of the 2 Hindu epic poems. So again, that shows how it's really deep rooted in religion and culture, and it's not just something that is there to entertain. And it's also been linked to various different art forms such as ballet, opera, dance and pantomime. I was particularly interested in it being compared to pantomime because I knew much more about pantomime than I did Kathakali when I began to research. And as I read that and researched and found that out, I started to see similarities and correlations between the two. So here's some pictures of a fully costumed, fully trained Kathakali actor. And I think the things that stand out here are obviously on the left-hand picture, the costume, the scale of the costume, the colour of the costume, the intricacy of the costume. And it just shows that there's not that intricacy element with just the mudras, it's throughout every element within Kathakali. And then on the left-hand side, I think you can see more clearly the mudras being performed. Up here, there's a much more tense but simplistic movement of 2 straight fingers. It's very certain. And then down here, we have an almost more blasé, relaxed Kathakali position. But actually, sometimes that's harder to withstand because that could may have to be withstood for a long period of time. And to be able to make that almost naturalistic and realistic is actually quite difficult. And here we've got a label diagram of that costume, and I think you can just see by the amount of labels on that diagram, it just shows how detailed the costume is. And I particularly circled the 2 elements of the costume that I think are the most obvious and stand out and recognisable, which is the headdress and the large skirt. So who watched Kathakali? Kathakali was known to be the people's theatre. It was for anybody and everybody. It was performed, and because it was for anybody and everybody, I found that interesting because other theatre traditions that I've previously learned about, such as commedia dell'arte, which is known to be only for the rich and no one else, this was for the rich and the poor and anybody in between. And because of that, it wasn't only performed in temples, which is the equivalent of, say, the way we go to the theatre nowadays, it was also performed in villages and people's homes. So it really was open for anybody to see and anybody to absorb the kind of religion and culture that they are living within at the time. Because it was so accessible to people, it slowly began to take a more prominent role in society. And because of this, there were more plays written based on the colourful epic, the Mahabharata, similarly to the Ramayana. And it became modernised, and it's come into the modern day society and still has stood the test of time. And I don't think that modernisation has actually impacted it in a negative way like it does with some other theatre traditions. It's held its roots and held its meaning and where it originates from, which I found sort of warming to know. So the characters within Kathakali all represent the story being told. They have symbolic personalities, and these are divided into 3 worlds. So you have the gods, which are called the divas, the humans, and then you have the demons, who are the asuras. So you almost have the good and powerful, the middle ground, and then you have the evil. And the plays are there to show these 3 worlds coming into conflict and converging, and that's what creates the plot. I actually found this quote that the characters are there to enact comic strips, and up until this point I actually thought that Kathakali, it was a very serious tradition based on history, religion, had very intricate, detailed elements throughout the theatre tradition, but actually it still has that element of comedy, which is nice to know. So the art of Kathakali, and it really is an art. Traditionally it was done by an all-male company of actors and dancers, and they took on years and years of training to be able to take on the complete physical state of a Kathakali actor. And you have to be able to gain full control of not only your hand muscles and your arm and just gain strength, but also to gain full control of facial muscles so that you can express any emotion when necessary and whenever throughout the play. And these are all necessary to be able to not only be easily distinguishable, but so the correct emotions can be conveyed at the correct times. So the function of the mudras are described frequently to be the mainstay of communication in Kathakali. They convey the poetic meanings and dramatic aspects of the play, where if you were to take the mudras away, you wouldn't have the plot, because the mudras is there as the form of communication between the audience and the characters and the play and the story. They replace the voice of the actors. As I said, the actors do not speak or sing. So the mudras is there in combination with the 9 rasas to convey the story and the emotions. Here are the 9 rasas. You can see an array of different emotions shown through those facial expressions. Obviously, I'm not going into detail into the 9 rasa stakes and focusing on the mudras. But I do think it's important to understand that to be able to withstand these facial expressions for long periods of time just shows why you know, it's something that if you want to train to be a Kathakali actor, you have to be dedicated to it. You have to have good coordination and good expertise. Learning mudras, it's all about the fingers. 13 years to train is the average amount of time. The fingers are seen as electrical circuits where energy is directed to discharge points at the fingertips. And the idea of energy, sort of mudras, is where what gives Kathakali life. And there are both single and double hand gestures, and they round up to a total of 470 symbols that can be depicted through the mudras. And just that level of detail has shown me as an actor how I need to focus on the slightest movements, even in a naturalistic play. So here's some examples of single hand gestures. You can see, for example, heroism is a clenched fist, straight thumb, more of a simplistic single hand gesture. Here are some more. And then you've got some double hand gestures, for example, an offering. You've got very, very steady hands, tension in the wrists, and also tension from the forearm to the elbow and all the way through to the upper arm. Okay, so an example performance. I'm going to be performing an example of a Kathakali play from the traditional repertory, and it's called The Flower of Good Fortune. And obviously I have not got the correct detailed costume, correct detailed makeup. I'm not going to be performing the rasas, which are the facial expressions, or any dance routine. I'm just going to be focusing on the individual units of meaning within the mudras. So the line that I'm going to be converting is beautiful dear-eyed one. So this is from a character who's very wise, and she's called Bipma. So I'm going to do each individual word and then do it all together. So beautiful is a double hand gesture. All the movements, majority come from behind. So the first one comes from behind and the right hand comes up. All 3 fingers are clenched together. This little finger is slightly raised and the forefinger is straight at a right angle. Then the left hand comes up and is in a more relaxed position than the right hand and wiggles and almost puts the attention onto the right hand gesture. That's beautiful. Dear is a one hand gesture, again coming from behind, tension within the wrist, tips back and forth. Eyed, double hand gesture from behind. If I was doing the rasas, my eyes would probably move from side to side to put the focus again onto the hands. And one, very simple, comes from behind with one finger up, completely clenched, very tensed in the forearm. Altogether, it is such as that. So my impact on my learning as this sort of evaluation on my research, I think that the inclusion of the different forms of art is fascinating. The way it's so deep rooted in the contextual elements, in the religion and the history, it's made me think as an actor, when I'm performing something, not to focus too much on the acting, but to think about the background, take a step back and think about where my character has come to be at that point. And it's made me just think much more about the detail I need to go in off stage rather than on stage. Comparison, I think Kathakali can be compared to various different theatre traditions. I've previously mentioned it can be compared to pantomime throughout, but actually I think the convention of mudras can be compared to the likes of other theatre practitioners' techniques such as Burkoff's, the way that both the Mudras and Burkoff's techniques all about using the body as a tool and large exaggerated mime. The idea of Mudras is large exaggerated mime, and this is all part of that physical storytelling that I'm going to take so much more into account when, as a performer, when I'm acting, just to the intricacy involved in every movement within Kathakali or Burkoff's acting. I need to do that as well, and I need to understand the reasons behind every move I make, and that will just create a much more meaningful performances from myself in the future.